Before we talk about the various editing tools in Dynaescape, let's talk briefly about how to erase objects and undo mistakes or redo things that we've drawn. The only way to erase objects or remove objects completely from your drawing is using the erase or delete entities tool here. It looks like a recycle bin. Basically how to use it, click on the tool, click on the object that you wish to erase, and then right click, and it will remove the object from your drawing. You can continue removing as many objects as you like. You can click on several of them, remove them like that. To undo things that you've done that, say for example, you didn't mean to erase those objects, you could use the undo keys over here, or if you're still within the tool that you're using and want to undo the things that you did with that tool, you can hit the delete key on your keyboard. Will undo one step at a time. So just by hitting the delete key on my keyboard will undo a command while I'm still in it. If I hit escape, for example, if I erase these things and then hit escape, now I'm in neutral mode. The delete key does not work anymore. Then I have to use the undo keys. Undo keys, redo will redo what I've just undone. Alright, so that's basically how you remove and undo things that you've done. Let's open up the edit toolbox and talk about some of the editing tools. The editing tools, some of them are very dependent on this copy toggle here. Some are dependent on the constraints and inference as well. But the copy toggle is an important one to remember. The first tool that we're going to talk about is the move or copy tool, and whether it's moving or copying that we're doing is dependent on the positioning of this toggle here. So for example, if I wanted to move this circle, click on the move tool. If I have copy turned on, that means that when I select this circle to move it, it's going to create a copy of it as opposed to moving it. If I were to turn copy off and select it, it will move the object as opposed to make a copy of it. Hit my delete key on my keyboard while I'm still within it, will actually position it back to where it was. It'll undo the last command within that step. So some of the editing tools will be dependent on the position of the copy toggle. They'll also be dependent on the constraints. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in order to use this move tool, first step is to select the object that you wish to move, or objects. In this case we could select more than one object to move, and you're left clicking on the objects. Then you right click to say that you're done selecting it. Now actually this is where this what's called a prompt line is very helpful. The prompt line generally tells you what your next steps are. In this case here, after we right clicked to say that we're done selecting it, it now wants us to select the from location. So where do you want to pick it up from? I could use my inference and pick it up from the origin of that circle, or from the edge of that circle or quadrant. I can pick it up from the origin here, and I can move that anywhere else on my screen. The next thing it needs me to do after I've selected it, now it becomes attached to my crosshairs, is it wants me to select the to location. So I have to click exactly where I want to position that circle in that tree. Left click and it drops it there, and I'm done. If I were to have copy on and do the same thing, for example, if I wanted to create more copies of this tree, left click on the tree, right click to say that I'm done selecting, grab the tree wherever I wish. In this case I'll grab the middle. Now it gets attached to my crosshairs. I can drop it down by left clicking on the location, but because I've got copy turned on, it actually allows me to create multiple copies of the same tree. If I had my constraints turned on, say to ortho, and selected that tree to move it, it'll only allow me to move it in the direction that the constraints are set to. It's set to 90 degrees, or ortho, which is 90 degrees, so I can only pull that tree in that direction if I wish to. So if that's what's happening while I'm trying to move things, turn your constraints to none, and you can pull it in any direction that you like. The next tool to talk about is the offset tool. The offset tool allows you to create parallel lines at a specific distance that we would type into the modifier here. So for example, if I wanted to create a border inside this circle that represents my solder course, I would type in the width of my border, for example 8 inches, and I would left click on that circle and then right click to say that I'm done selecting it. Now it wants me to tell it which location or which side of this line do I want to offset to. Now again, this tool is dependent on the copy toggle, whether it makes a copy of it or whether it moves it. Right now my copy toggle is off. If I wanted to make a parallel line and keep the original line, I need to turn copy on and then select the side of the circle that I wish to put it on. I want to put it on the inside of the circle, so I click once inside the circle. It's going to make a parallel line to that circle on the inside. If I wished to offset something like this line here, for example, say I want to make a parallel line that's 3 feet away, and I'll select the first line segment. Now you notice that these are individual line segments. If I wish to offset them all together so that it makes a parallel line that's all attached together just like the original is, I need to select them in the order that they're joined, like that. Then right click to say that I'm done selecting the objects that I want to offset. Now it wants to know which side of this line do I want to put it on. I'm going to select this side, and it's going to give me a parallel line to the original, leaving the original in place. If I wish to offset on this side and yet turn copy off, I'll select those in the order that they're joined together, and then I'm going to right click to say that I'm done. And right click doesn't matter, you can right click anywhere on the screen as long as you right click to say that you're done. Now it wants to know which side. I'm going to do this side here, and you notice that it moves that line over because copy was turned off. Now I've got a curved line. For example, this could be a curved pathway. If I wanted to offset that line, say 4 feet, turn copy on so that I make a copy of it, all I need to do is left click, right click, left click. It offsets it to the distance that I have in the modifier here. If I continue to offset, you can sometimes run into situations like this where the reason why it did this is that because this circle here or curve here has a radius that's less than 4 feet, which is less than that offset distance, meaning that if I try to offset that, it throws it off because the math doesn't work. This is less than 4 foot radius. I can't offset it more than that actual radius is, so you get stuff like this happening. So I can hit the delete key on my keyboard to undo that step, knowing that I can't offset that one that much. So I'll have to change either the radius of this, or I'll have to explode this possibly and offset these as separate lines together. There are a couple of rotating tools in the Edit toolbox that we can talk about as well. The rotate objects around a location is the simplest one to use, and it's dependent on both the copy toggle and the constraints. So if my copy toggle is on, that means it'll rotate it but leave the original. If I just want to rotate the object, in most cases that's likely the situation where you want to actually rotate it and remove the original, turn copy off. And basically how it works is you left click on the tool, there's no modifier, left click on the object that you wish to rotate. Once you're done selecting the object that you wish to rotate, you can then right click, doesn't matter where, and then now it needs to know what's the center or rotation center. So if I want to rotate it off the end of this line here, I can turn my inference on and grab the end of that line and rotate it around the end. And as I move my mouse away, the object will rotate. The further you move your mouse away from the center of rotation, the more control that you have. The closer you are, the harder it is to control the actual angle that you're rotating it to. So I can pull that around. When I'm happy with the location or the angle that it's being rotated to, I can left click and it stays there. The other rotate tool in the Edit toolbox has a modifier that allows you to enter an angle that you wish to rotate it at and how many you'd like to copy in the rotation. And basically how it works is if I just want to rotate this 90 degrees, I can just set that to 90 degrees, or say I want to make it 45, select the objects that I wish to rotate, then it will actually allow me to actually change the rotation center. So I can actually choose a different one and position it by eye, or actually by using an actual rotation point, say off the end of that line there. So it'll rotate by whatever angle that I've chosen here. If I want to go another angle, minus 45, and it will rotate it in the other direction. Right? If copy is turned on, it'll create a copy of the original and leave it there. If I make 2 or 3 copies, let me move this over for a minute. If I want to make 2 or 3 copies of it, I can change that to say 4, and I can rotate 4 of them around the origin here. So you can use this for creating patterns and things like that when you're creating details. Next, I want to talk about the Explode tool. The Explode tool is used to, this is the Explode tool here. Basically what the Explode tool does is it breaks objects into individual lines and arcs, so it breaks it down into the simplest form. Now, objects like this polyline consists of a series of arcs that are joined together to form the polyline. If I were to select it, it would highlight all the individual segments, or it would highlight the entire line. And if I were to right-click and then hit my escape on my keyboard and click on those lines, you'll notice that now they're all individual line segments as opposed to polylines like the original line was. So now they've been broken down to their simplest form. I cannot explode them anymore, so if I try to explode those, they are in their simplest form. I can only explode objects that are have been joined together like this polyline, or objects that have been grouped together into things like library figures. Those things can be exploded as well. Once you click on those, sometimes there's other objects within the figure that are still able to be broken down into simpler forms, like this perimeter of this tree. I can explode those as well. But once I've done that, I cannot continue to explode it because it's already in its simplest form. I'll zoom in on that, have a close look at that. You'll see now it's all individual line segments. These are the simplest form it can be put into. That's the Explode tool. The next tool I want to talk about is the Explode tool. The Explode tool in the Edit toolbox is used to break down objects into their simplest form. A line is the simplest form that you can have on a CAD drawing in Dynarscape. A polyline is made up of individual lines and arcs, and when I click on a polyline, the entire line lights up as opposed to individual line segments. Because I've selected the Explode tool, when I left click on that line and then right click to finish it and hit my escape key on my keyboard, you'll see that it's broken down into individual lines and arcs. I can do the same thing for this tree over here. I cannot explode objects that are already in their simplest form. For example, if I try to explode this circle, it won't highlight it because that circle is a simple form. It's made up of one continuous line with a center point. Whereas something like a library figure like this tree here is made up of a grouping of different pieces of geometry that can be broken down into a simpler form. So if I were to left click on my tree and then right click, you can see that if I hit escape, that now I've got individual components. This is a polyline still, so I could explode that one more time into even simpler geometry. Now when I hit escape and zoom in on that, you'll see that this tree outline is now made up of individual line segments. It's been broken down to the simplest form. And I can use the Explode tool to break down objects in order to be able to edit them in their simplest form.